Evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and I'm going to try to look directly into the camera this week. I looked at the program we did last week, and I thought I was looking at the camera, and it's not going to look it off. I've got to ask John where these cameras are situated. We got so many cameras in here now. They have to look and see which one is on.
Well, basically, just look in the general direction towards this way, because there's.
It's really this way?
They're two like almost on top of each other.
Oh, really?
One's
So I'm looking this way rather than looking at the cameras here.
Just look that direction. You see them right there.
Right there.
Right there, yep.
Okay, I thought that's what I was doing last week. I kept saying, I hope the viewers don't think I'm trying to look away from where they are. I guess you're right out there in the center there. I got to tell you something. You come in the studio today, and we're getting so sophisticated around here. I came here today, and John was showing me some of the new equipment he's bought, and just continue to grow and develop in the studio. And now I see this other microphone over here. You can't see it on the camera. We got another microphone here, one of those stand-up can. That's kind I see on CBS, so I think we're getting real close to these networks.
Well, that's really good for all kinds of broadcasting. It's a Yeti microphone, and you could turn that so it could actually pick up 360 degrees around that whole top.
Oh, is that right?
And then, or you could do it like more localized. It's really good for audio. It's like 4 different uses. It's different arrays, to pick up the sound. So it's pretty good.
Well, the only thing that's missing right now is a red carpeting when I get here, so I expect that next week. But that's really great to see the growth and development of the studio. I can remember when I first came in about 7 years ago. We have guests in here. And I've told the story a couple of times before, but we'd have guests come in, and they're just talking away and thinking they're on radio, because all they were seeing here were these microphones, and we'd have the headphones for the be able to get some feedback in terms of how you're sounding. And at the end of the program, I would say, well, look into the camera and tell the viewers out there what you would like to have them to know about your campaign, or what you like to leave them with the last word in your message. And they would say, look in the camera, and they look around and say, there's a camera in here. we have the small camera on the mouthpiece. And so that's the beginning point. And now we've been growing exponentially, and we're a much larger studio right now. We're doing some things on top of this studio and developing some other ideas of how we want to go about expanding our production and hopefully being able to do more outreach. But we are continuing to work and finding what we do here. And when I came to the studio, John showed me some equipment here that he had bought that's going to be able to move the cameras around through some type of electronic means, where we are doing it right now manually. So I guess John just hit a button, and then the camera will go over here and swim around and all of that.
It's a camera switcher. It's just like they use in the networks. And we try to use one program, but it's a program. Mm-hmm. And it's energy taken from resources taken from the computer, so it bogs it down. Well, this is more mechanical and electronic both, but it's more stable. It basically allows the switching should be more relatively easier than what it is currently. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to when we get hooked up and see how it operates. I want to wish everybody out there in the listenership and viewership a wonderful Memorial Day. We did an article just recently, a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact, before I came to the studio, on this important day. Memorial Day has a rich history to it, which I think we need to be more attentive to and to be more aware of the foundational aspects of it. It's a tremendous history that goes to the heart of some things we need to understand as we go through the machinations of paying our respects to those who have fallen on the battlefield, distinguishing what we do on this day from what we do on Veterans Day, when we in fact just simply acknowledge all the ones who have served in uniform and have served this country. Those who died in the battlefield, though, that's what we're doing today. And many of you use it also for things like family matters, those loved ones who have gone on to their reward. And some people use it for family reunions. The idea of it goes back to, I think it goes back to the aftermath of the Civil War, where it was called Decoration Day, and it was a time set aside, I think the 1st of May, in commemoration of those on both sides of the so-called Civil War, which I would call it the War of Secession, the attempt to secede from the Union. And those persons who fought with valor on both sides of the question, the idea was to commemorate the ones who had fallen on the battlefield during this 4-year war between family members on one side and family members on the other side, one region of the country fighting against another region of the country, one which had departed and said they had another country they set up in terms of the Confederate States, starting out with 7 and then later on 4 others joined them when Lincoln reinforced Fort Sumter, and they thought that these 7 states that initially left the Union had a right to leave the Union, having voluntarily come into an association of their own making back in 1787 when the Constitution was drawn up on the 17th of September 1787 and was ratified the following year on July 2nd, 1788. I think those dates, I don't have to think those dates are accurate. Those dates are accurate in terms of the foundational moments of this country. And
I noticed you use the term Decoration Day. That my friend and I were just talking about the other day. His family's from the South too. They're from Tennessee, and that's kind of a Southern thing to call it Decoration Day.
It's a Southern thing because the experience as it was drawn out at that time was a Southern observance. And don't forget, when they reinterred those bodies in the aftermath of the war, I think about around 1873 or so, when they reinterred many of the fallen soldiers, some of whom had been buried in these mass graves. We saw an example of that during the filming of this movie called Glory, where they were all buried together that had fallen in trying to take Fort Wagner. What they did, they reinterred some of those bodies and put them in these, they buried them in these national cemeteries close to the battlefields, and they would be mostly in the South because that's where most of the war was fought. In the southern parts of the country. And I remember reading where they asked one of the soldiers in the Confederate States, why are you fighting us? And the reply was, we're fighting you because you're down here. And that's how they saw it. They saw it as an invasion of their homes. And if we could understand the reason why this war is being fought and get off this nonsense that the good guys were in the North and they were fighting to get the slaves off the plantations, and the Southerners were fighting to keep them on the plantation.
but I just found out something yesterday.
Nonsense.
I just found out something today, kind of connection to Memorial Day. I guess Mark Twain actually served 2 weeks in the Confederate Army, and I never thought that because he was never a person I would consider to be on board for slavery. He wrote vehemently against the treatment of blacks at that time, where he was considered a real radical at that time. The way he wrote. And he also he and his friend, other people, I forget the other writer, used to write articles about encouraging mixed marriages and stuff like that. Encouraging, he thought they'd be a productive, produce great people and all that stuff. So to him, a person with that intellect, and he's massively intellectual. I think people don't know how to respect him enough.
Yes, and the idea that these people were fighting to keep people on a plantation is mockery. You look at Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was no racist. Robert E. Lee was a Union soldier, but when the state he represented went out of the Union, he, having his allegiance to his own state, went back to defend his state against the army that he once had represented, and he was fighting on the side of his state against this encroachment on the part of the Union forces. We need to understand this war, which we have not yet understood. I wrote a little bit about it today, trying to bring a little bit of clarity.
And he was the only one that lost his citizenship. Jefferson Davis didn't lose his citizenship. Robert E. Lee did.
Yes, that's right.
And they also commandeered his family. Arlington National Cemetery is where he lived at. They had commandeered that to bury the dead. Yeah. Our national cemetery was basically taken over from a man who got caught in the middle. We were all supposed to be our state. Our states were supposed to come first. The federal government was secondary. And it's where everybody would have fought for their states. That was your family.
Yeah, John, it's so refreshing to hear you say that because this is just not general knowledge because of the people that had to come in the aftermath of this war and justify why 600,000 Americans have been killed. They can't have this war being fought for the reason it was fought for, which is telling states that had voluntarily come into the Union they had no right to leave if it behooved them to do so. And then you have this war being fought over the taxation policy of this country. It could not be seen as a war being fought over monetary interests and justify the number of persons that died in this war. So they had to have this high moral calling that this war was brought into existence for, to justify the carnage that had been created. But that's nothing but a fallacious, almost like a blasphemous analysis of this war. None of that is true. This war was not. In fact, they have this folklore going around that Harry Beecher Stowe, who wrote the novel, as you recall, in 1852 called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and supposedly when Lincoln met her in the White House, she visited the White House in December of 1862, and the folklore is that when meeting Harry Beecher Stowe, who came from a long line of family members who were abolitionists, Lincoln was supposed to have said, "Oh, and so you're the young lady, the little lady who brought on this great war." This is nonsense. How could Lincoln have said that in December of 1862 when he had said on August the 22nd, September the 22nd, 1862, Lincoln had said, "My paramount object in this struggle is to preserve the Union. And if I could do it by freeing none of the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could do it by freeing one, leaving all the others alone, I would do that also. But what I do for the colored race, I do it because I believe it preserves the Union." And so this is a Union war, and it had not been turned into a war to do anything with the slaves until 1863. And how is he going to say that in 1862? The war is over slavery. It has not been declared as such until the Emancipation Proclamation was issued.
I got a copy of this book, and I got to find it somewhere. I got it, but it was a copy. It was a book comprised of letters written by both Union and Confederate soldiers. And there was a guy who was from Michigan who basically had a very I don't want to fight for these,
Mm-hmm.
And as the war progressed, and that was the prevalent thought for a lot of people. It
Sure.
was a war on slavery. But as he got to see the South, as he went to the South, he saw some of the conditions that the blacks are going through, living in, the slaves are living in. He become more convinced that he was on the right side. But they're way down deep south. And the thing is, the privations that they might have been suffering is due to the war, because let's face it, like, that big, prison war camp they had down Andersonville. Everybody talks how horrific that was when they were starving. My family were in the Union, so we came up from regiments, raised up around here in Flint area, Genesee County. But yeah, it was horrific. Andersonville, that was horrible. It was, but they also couldn't even feed themselves. So having all these prisoners on hand, I forget how many thousands were in that camp. But it was a hardship for these people to feed themselves, to feed their own animals, to feed their troops. It wasn't deliberately done to starve them to death. If they had the food to feed them, I think they would have fed them. But it was basically because they didn't have the supplies.
Yeah, this war needs to be more clearly understood for a number of reasons. That being one of them. I think it was Andersonville where some of the blacks that had been taken as POWs, who were considered to be slaves, really runaway slaves, and when they were captured, they were looked at as being persons that were fighting against their slave masters, and some of them were killed. I think that's when Lincoln then said that he would, in fact, take the life of POWs that were captured from the Confederate Army, and they would be killed for each one they killed at that particular prison. So that the war has a lot of different angles to it, but we need to get our facts straight about the nature of this war and understand that when the war came to a close, because it was a war to end secession, which that question should have been taken to court, and I think that they've been taken to court. I think there might have been a different outcome given who was on the court at that time. And the rules have been made in the Dred Scott case in 1857, where there was Roger B. Taney, who was the Supreme Court Chief Justice at that time. I think he would have had a different outcome. and militarily, where this was prosecuted because of the provocation on the part of Abraham Lincoln. And we have to get that straight as well in terms of the provocation that was going on in terms of the reinforcing of Fort Sumter, which had now become a part of the Confederate states, a different country at this point, and to reinforce a fort that was on the soil of another country. This is a provocative act, and Lincoln knew it was a provocative act, but he also knew he could not fire the first shot. And by making the South then look to be the aggressor, he could then organize the war around the fact that we've been fired upon, the Union's sovereignty has been violated, and they can prosecute this war. It's not very different than what you saw what Roosevelt did in 1941 when he knew that he could not get into the war through the Atlantic Ocean. Who's going to do a thing over there? And what he did was backdoor it, according to John Toland, by going in the Pacific, and was doing provocative things over there behind the American people's back. And when Pearl Harbor was attacked, he then used that not to go into the Pacific where the attack had occurred. He sent troops over there to Europe.
You know what's weird too? Most Americans aren't aware of this. The Japanese did not want it to be a surprise attack on Pearl, so they had their representatives go into the Secretary of War's office to go in there officially declare war, and then after the war they make the declaration, the commencement of the attack. Mm-hmm. But they knew that this was going to happen. They knew this up to 2 weeks before. Right. By some counts, longer. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they kept the Japanese delegation, the Japanese officials, outside the Secretary of War's or Secretary of Defense, I think, or Secretary of War's office, inner office. And after they let them in after the attack commenced, then it was considered dishonorable by their own Japanese standards because their standards are more.
That's exactly morality. Right. John, you know who the president was? You know what the holdup was? They were going to be shown in to see the president. You know what the holdup was? Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in the Oval Office talking to Joe Louis. That's what held up the delegation getting there to see the president.
You see, to me, it's like I grew up in my mom's family they're solidly Democrats, but I grew up actually. My mom kind of left that. She left the Catholic Church. She also left being a Democrat. And she was very critical. She had like some Democratic presidential candidates, and when I was growing up, she also hated some of them. But she kind of flipped back and forth on that. I mean, she was always usually the best person, she thought. But I grew up knowing the attack on Pearl Harbor was a planned thing that the American government knew about weeks prior. Mm-hmm. They intercepted communications between Tokyo and the U.S. The Japanese embassy and stuff like that right here in Washington. So they knew weeks in advance.
You're really up on. So many different things, John, and that is certainly true what you're saying here. We need to just kind of go behind what we were taught in these universities and those high school and middle school classrooms and go and read the history for ourselves, research through the primary sources and read it for yourself. That I've actually turned off television. I don't even watch any news programs anymore. I get the news from I go online and I pull up certain sites that have a multiple number of articles that they are referring to for the day of that which has made the news. And I read those sources. And I just turn off listening to the ones who are the intermediaries between that which occurred and those who are then mouthing for our benefit their interpretation of it. I want to go back and get the information for myself, and I can certainly do the analysis. I don't need them to tell me what I should think about it, and I don't trust them anymore, given how they've been using a number of the issues that have come up. I guess I begin to really get into the idea that I need to get away from the news sources once I saw what they did with the Bundy situation in Nevada, and then I looked at how they handle the Sterling, the Donald Sterling case. I didn't like the way in which that was presented. Having read the transcript of the tape and also listened to the tape also over the course of the time they put it out. First of all, 5 minutes and 41 seconds, then later on 9 minutes. And I said that that right there becomes a problem in terms of giving it out piecemeal rather than the whole thing. And they never did ask a question, which I thought was really pertinent question in terms of her admitting V. Steriano admitting she had 100 hours of other tape. and nobody ever asked for, well, let's hear those tapes, which could not have been anything that was that would have been convicting, because if it had been that, she would not have had to, on the 7th of April, tape him secretly to get him to say some things that he had not said prior to that. Nobody asked for the tapes. And when I began to see how they were manipulating the public, I said, I'm out of here with that. And I have not listened to a news program since the Donald Sterling case. I thought, well, I did listen to the aftermath of it. There were people like Anderson Cooper of CNN. You know, I don't watch that station, but I wanted to see, since he was doing the first interview of Donald Sterling, I was watching that, and once I saw what he did over a couple of days, going as far back as bringing Elgin Baylor, and then people that he had once hired. Elgin Baylor, who had no class, worked for the man 23 years and had nothing good to say about him, yet couldn't cite a single racist comment the man had made to him in 23 years. And the only thing he could come up with was he took him into a locker room one time when the basketball players were changing their clothes and they were dressed up to the waist and they had the chest out. He was telling these women, look how wonderful those bodies are, these athletes. And then he's going to cite that as a racist incident and have that as why he think the man is a racist. When I saw them doing things like that, I said, okay, I'm finished with the media on television, and I already had gotten it down to 3 programs, and now I don't even watch those anymore. But we have got to, go to the primary sources and be smart enough, and I think not you don't have to be really that smart, just to be aware that you open yourself up to manipulation if someone else does the homework for you, and you come behind them and having to take their word for it that this is what the evidence is, and here's what the documents actually say. I think you're really morally constrained to find out for yourself, because if you're acting upon information and the information is wrong, and you're acting in a way in which people are being hurt by it, then that's a moral imperative that you are operating from. You are morally compelled to know what the information is for yourself. And
I have a question for you.
A victim of somebody else.
You're pretty up on stuff. Somebody posted a meme about Rick Snyder and how he's not helping the veterans of the United States, in Michigan. Michigan's supposed to be dead last for veterans benefits. They posted this meme on Facebook just 2 days ago. Somebody did. Anyway, I said, well, I'm not aware where the states have money available from the state to go to veterans. Isn't that overseen totally by the federal government?
Yeah, the federal government is responsible. They serve the nation, John. And if we had the states that would be over this this aggregation of the wealth that's put aside for them, you'd have differential by poor states not being able to give the same benefits as others, but they serve the same country. The national government is the one that called them into service, and it's up to the national government. That's why you have the Veteran Administration. That's not a state organization; it's a federal organization. You have the Administration of Veterans Affairs, and these are situated from the federal government, through which all the states will, through taxation, pay into the benefit. But the benefits are dispersed by the federal government, and they're doing a very poor job of it. We have to say. We're saying 43 veterans on the last couple of weeks reported as having died because they couldn't get the care that they needed.
And they were using Veterans Administration hospitals as being the the model to point to about how good Obamacare could be. I'm not thinking they're going to be hearing that anymore.
And I don't know how they got that constructed in the first place, given the record of the Veterans Administration. They've never been good at what they're doing. And I think Mark Levine made a point last week that is very, very much on point. He said that it's not so much the individuals either that's administrating over the program. These programs that are run by the government can't work. The way they're constructed, they can't work. You have to let the market into the place where you have these services being delivered, because the market has a vested interest in making sure it works. What is the vested interest of the politicians who remove themselves from any responsibility by insulating themselves from those they appoint to do the administrative work? And they can always claim it's not them, it's the person they appointed. And then they do what they did with this Veteran Administration administrator, who they get rid of, but the guy's getting ready to retire anyway. It's just like what they did with Lois Lerner, where, yeah, she walks away, but she's getting ready to retire anyway, and she walks away with full retirement benefit. There's no accountability there. And so Mark Levine was making the point, and he's absolutely right, that the construction of it, whenever the government gets involved in delivery of services, you can believe there's going to be a massive amount of inefficiency built into the network because government is by definition inefficient.
The reason why they look for it to create jobs, so they could point to, well, look how many jobs we created. But they're creating a job based on something nobody really yearns for, wants to seek out on their own, or and forcing you to buy into this. Okay, like Social Security and all this other stuff. Now they always propose, private investment in, instead of going and giving your money to Social Security, these liberals and you look at that. They point to the they fall of the dollar and everything back in 2008 to crash. Okay, they're still performing. At least there's some money trickling in, even at a certain lower percentage rate than it is with the Social Security, which is already gone. The money's already gone. There's no money in the Social Security funds.
If you put anything in the hands of politicians, you're asking for political results. And we're getting political results with the VA. And it really is a disservice. It's really dishonorable on the part of our political leadership to have the veterans go out and serve the country. And we give them Memorial Day to honor their service, their ultimate sacrifice they made for the country. And then we have these politicians who are running the country so badly and showing that they have no respect for the service they're claiming that they're honoring. We look at Washington, D.C., and all we see is nothing but dishonoring the persons who have sacrificed their lives for this country. And those who are in the service have not sacrificed their lives, but are serving the nation by risking their lives. We see the dishonorable ways in which they are treated by the political leadership of this country.
I think unless it's really a threat to American security, like 99% of the wars we've been have not been a real threat to the United States, sending men to die just because you want to be considered good in the people's eyes of the world is insanity. And you are serving. I believe you should have a strong military. I believe you should have a good standing strong military. But and that kind of runs counter to the Constitution, and I'm a constitutionalist, but I'm a realist in saying that there's always been threats. But let's face it, taking on ourselves to try to patrol the entire world and throwing people into the fray when there's no real answers, there's no real set plans or some kind of concept to actually head for. To me, that's a disservice. You're destroying human lives. How can you? Where do you go to? Even if you give their benefits to their survivors, to their family members, how is that honoring them? I mean, and then you're begrudgingly giving these people that stuff.
It's a national disgrace. If you talk about putting our soldiers' life on the line for other nations, and then the taxpayers are paying for it around the world, this is not honorable on the part of these politicians. Can you imagine taxing the American people to the point where we can hardly stand in this country so as to be able to do something around the world that has nothing to do with the national interests of this nation is not only dishonorable, but is actually criminal. How can you even respect these politicians? And then, John, you and I were talking about Conyers, which gives us an example of who these persons actually are. These are not patriots in the nation's capital. These people dishonor the Memorial Day. Every day that they're in office, they're dishonoring our fallen soldiers by being the kind of people they are in power. And here is John Conyers. He's a person that has served since 1965, which means that he's been in office for 49 years and runs a campaign that's run so badly. His oversight of his campaign was run so badly, he's not even on the ballot. And all it took was 1,000 registered voters to place his name on the ballot to run for another term. Let's see, 49 times will be 25 different times he's run for office. And he goes to court at 85 years of age. The man is 85, and he's served 24, going on 25 different terms, 2-year terms. He's not on the ballot. You would think that the man would have some sense of proportion, that anything that he has not given over the course of a career in Washington, 49 years, given the state of Washington, given his tenure, like it's not been good during that 49 years, you would think that they would have enough honor that if something came up that make them get pushed aside, they will take that and run with it. But no, they want to push the envelope to get back on the ballot, get back into power, as if there's something they've done that they can stand and say, okay, this is the reason why I want to finish what I started doing. Started doing when? 1965?
Like, if he even
This is dishonorable.
the 1,000 signatures he needed, if he paid one or two people $1, a dollar a signature to get the registered voters to sign it, let's face it, $1,000 or a little bit over if he paid for printing materials. But hell, he makes that one day with all the backdoor deals he's probably making. So it's cost effective. He's not even being smart, not doing that. Just sheer arrogance. I don't have to do this because I've been here for so long.
Yes.
And they demand it. Guess what they are?
That's what it was.
They're racist.
It was absolute arrogance to take it to court. Here in the court itself, this was, what's this judge's name? I try to remember their names because we need to keep these persons in mind about who's doing us in on the federal system. Of course, they're appointed for life, and we can't get to them because they have these lifetime tenures, making these ridiculous policies and overturning laws being passed by the voters. The judge in this state was saying that he is taking the precedent set by the judge in Ohio that ruled that their law, which governs how you get on the ballot, that is also unconstitutional. And I like to read the opinion that they wrote, because I don't think that you are acting unconstitutional in terms of saying that there is a process to which you get on the ballot. What the court is trying to claim is because there are only 3 requirements for running for the House and running for the Senate, which has to do with residency of the state, citizenship of the country, and being a member of the state in which you're running. If you're running in the district, then the district in which you're running. That's not suborned by saying that you have to go through a process to get on the ballot. They're not saying they're changing the constitutional requirements for being eligible to run for the office. That's not what they're claiming here. They're saying that you run under that standard, but to be on the ballot, to be able to, the process is that we have a certain procedure that's required. It doesn't eliminate anybody that is 25 years of age, which is the minimum age for the House, or 30 years for the Senate, which is the minimum age for the Senate. 14 years in the state, 14 years in the country, rather.
This was Strom.
14 years a citizen.
If this was Jesse Helms or Strom Thurmond, oh my God, they're Republicans. I think both those guys are Republicans. They would say they have Alzheimer's or senile. This man is because I guess
You're
Democrats.
exactly
There's a
right.
difference between Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats automatically better prepared for office even in the later years of their life because look, John Glenn. He's been around how many years? I don't know if he's still a senator or not, but he was.
Yeah, look at Dingell. Look at John Dingell.
Let's face it, a Dingell family member is going to hold that. He's been in power 40 years?
58 years.
58 years. He got it from his dad. He took
27 years for his father.
And now his wife wants to run. Why don't we just abolish elections and just have royal families?
Yeah, we have got, John, and I think it's so dishonorable to the people who are fighting for freedom of this country. And what we have here is a oligarch in this country. We don't. I don't even think that we are. And I'm getting ready to write this narrative later on this week. I'll be writing about this country as we're now in a country that is really fascist at this point. And I hate to say that because people want to believe in that we were what we, the way we were, that song by Barbra Streisand, the way we were. Well, the way we were is not the way we are right now. We are a different place today than we were when we were coming up. When I was coming up, people in my age group are saying, I was born in one country, yes, and they're now saying they're in a different country. It don't mean the land space has been changed. but we're not in the same country now ideologically. And we see that everywhere. We saw it in the Don Sterling case. That would have been so much about sticks and stones will break my bones, but names won't hurt me. That wouldn't have bothered anybody. We would have gone on about our business. A man doesn't lose his property because he said something in private to his girlfriend that you didn't like and then really didn't understand what he said.
Another thing is all the black players of Sterling's team, they're making damn good money, right? So if you're offended about it, they could cry like Liberace's. I could cry all the way to the bank. You know?
That's right. And a race doesn't pay you. How much money do they get paid for by the Klan? Did the Klan ever do any restitution, do any community service for any? And that's the old Klan, not the new Klan. The old Klan was back there during the time when they were not penalizing anybody for lynching in this country. Once they stopped that and began to prosecute, the lynching stopped because the politicians went back up.
I wonder, the players for Sterling's team, I wonder how many of them gave money to the NAACP like he did.
I would think very, very few of them. And I'll tell you another thing. You go read Rodman's book called Bad as I Want to Be. That's a very good book to read about these basketball players. And what Rodman says in that book, as crazy as he is, but he did write some very profound things in terms of how some of the politics operate in the NBA. First of all, saying it's nothing but about sex and money. So what Don Sterling said about Magic Johnson, that's not untrue. He said he went to every city and slept with everybody in the city, and that's what those basketball players do. That's what Magic Johnson did. And when he got HIV positive, I'm not glorifying the disease. I'm talking about his practice. And I don't know why you get mad about somebody telling the truth. But what Rodman said is that basketball players come out of the street and they sound like Mark Cuban sounded. In fact, they sound worse. Mark Cuban was saying, okay, a black person walks down the street. He's got a hoodie on. He goes on the side of the street. He said, a person come down the street and is white and got a tattoo. I cross over. What's the problem with that? Jesse Jackson said it, and nobody raised an eyebrow. And John, when Stephen Smith tried to defend Mark Cuban, and I give Steve Smith, I oftentimes have a problem with some of the things Smith says, but the man has character, and I have to give him credit for that. And they came out with Uncle Tom stuff. Oh, you Uncle Tom, because he's defending a man for telling the truth. And he came out, and I give him a lot of credit for this. He said, I don't care what they say. And the man stuck to his guns. I said, well, hello, you're not Kobe Bryant.
You know what I hate about it? This whole world is you can't be a genuine person. They say they want to know the warts and all. They want everybody to be able else. They could who they describe as a minority or being underprivileged or being picked out or singled out for harassment. Those people they want to elevate. Everybody else they want to have them cowering. And so that's the liberals. That's the left response to everything. Instead of saying from here on nothing else and this is not going to be allowed. No, we're going to allow this group to beat up on those people who we identify as the enemy, whoever we identify, and when is that going to cease? When is the tables going to be turned on that?
Not until we confront it. If we don't confront, that's why I was glad that Steve A. Smith stuck to his guns. This is not Kobe Bryant here. He hollered a couple of times at Bryant. I thought the man had some character. I didn't think he had a lot, but I thought he had some character. He found out he didn't have any character. And they started hollering at him, hollering at the shoes he's trying to sell. Tell him, I'm not going to buy this product that you're pushing, and moved him off his commercial interests and began to challenge it and said they're going to boycott. The guy got scared. That same day, he went out there and tweeted that I was wrong and all that, backing up on his position. But Steve Smith, I give you a lot of applause here. You stood up on principle and said you didn't care what they said. And that shocked them. That's what we got to do more of. We got to confront this totalitarian mindset in the black community. We got to confront it head on and stop buck dancing and kowtowing and bending over like a willow tree in the face of this assault and stand up to it. In fact, a lot of people have gotten off my wall with these attacks. I used to have attacks 10 and 15 a day on my wall. You know what I would do? When they come on my wall with those attacks, I go and attack against them. In other words, I wouldn't try to defend what they were attacking me for. I go on the attack. my defense was an offense against them. Those guys stopped writing on the wall, and I don't mind the attacks. They don't bother me because I'm not going to be moved off of what my positions are by people who I consider to be numbskulls. and I think it dishonors the nation for us to let those that dishonor the service that people have. We have freedom in this country because people paid a price for it. And Memorial Day is a way to honor that. And for us to give up those freedoms without fighting for it, because these people fought and they're in a grave for it. And, I remember when Charles de Gaulle was telling, I forget who he was talking to, but he said, I want the Yankees out of France. And whoever he's talking to, who's an American soldier, said to him, does that include the ones that's out there laying in Flanders Field?
De Gaulle and Nixon had a kind of a tumultuous relationship together. But I mean, I never understood the French. Okay, I've talked to people in Lebanon, and they said, well, you owed it to France because they helped you during the revolution. I went, we lost far more in 2 wars for France than they did ever with our American Revolution. So how much more do we owe them? We acknowledge our indebtedness to them. They've done everything they could to crap on the memories of the people that died for that.
Yes, the French gave us support during the Revolutionary War. Lafayette and those persons that came here, some of the persons they brought from Haiti, fought in this country on the side of the colony. We paid them back tenfold. But what we did in World Wars I and II, and also what we did with the Marshall Plan, which we got no respect for. We'll be talking about that next week, as a matter of fact.
Do you remember that Canadian broadcaster back there in the Vietnam era? He was a Canadian, and he actually did the speech about America. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most patriotic. It brings tears to my eyes. He laid it. He said America has got bad things going on, but they're open about it. They talk about it. You ever hear scandals like the horrific deeds that European nations did openly discussed as much as we talk? He said Americans just open themselves up, and then he ends it. He said, when things turn around for the United States and they're actually staying on their feet more solid. And this was back in the 70s, so we still haven't got there yet, guy. He's gone now. But anyway, he said, I hope that they remember that there was a few friends outside its shores that stood by them.
Yes.
But because America is a very corrupt nation.
Yes.
And I hate these morons on the left saying Michael Moore. I saw a post and he did. He said America was born in violence. Gee, Mikey, tell me which country wasn't born in violence? Africa? Any countries in Africa, Europe? Which ones people didn't butcher each other for?
That's the kind of dishonoring of the soldiers I'm talking about. We have freedom in this country, and of course I wouldn't take anybody's right to speak away from them. But we have to understand the source from which these persons are speaking, the Michael Moores and those on the left who are really doing nothing but tearing the country down. They're using speech, of course, and they share the right to speak. But we need to have people that will stand up to that speech. I was saying in a post that I did that when you have comments that are attributed to Don Sterling, it doesn't require less speech, it requires more speech. Let's say that I don't agree that the comments in that tape are racist comments. I don't agree with that. I think that to listen to that tape clearly is to understand that there's an absence of racism on this tape except the interpretation being imposed upon it by Steriano. I tell you what impressed me in that tape is that this is being secretly taped. He doesn't know it's being secretly taped. It's between him and his girlfriend, and he's talking about how he wants her to present himself in public, and he never once used that N-word. I'm tempted, I wouldn't do it here, but if I was writing on my post, I would use that word, because I don't use N-word. I use the word. The rap artists use it, and you don't say anything about it. But not one time in that tape, has anybody listened to this tape except George Moss? And not one time they refer to blacks as anything other than black people. This is being privately taped. Where if the man was coming off of a racist rant, they said this was a rant this man was involved in. Not one time did this man even raise his voice at this woman. And he's talking in private, doesn't know it's being taped, and not one time used the N-word. Has anyone paid attention to that? What you have on that tape there is a media, as I was telling you earlier, about we are morally compelled to listen to it ourselves and get an interpretation of it for ourselves and stop acting like a parrot where people are telling you what you're supposed to think about that which they're presenting. And they get ready to take this man's team from him and people do not understand the gravity of the problem that presents in terms of speech can now get your property taken from you, and we're setting a precedent, and we're applauding this because of the fascism that we've adopted in our own lifestyle.
41 Democratic senators all basically want to repeal the First Amendment. 41%. There's a guy locally who owns a computer shop here who wants to get Rush Limbaugh removed off the airwaves because he doesn't like what he says. He wants to put pressure on any of the radio stations to carry his show or anything to get people to stop advertising locally with him and stuff like that. I said, what about the First Amendment? He goes, how about community standards?
Yeah.
Now, this guy is on the left. And I know probably in the 60s and 70s, he was all for free speech. But now he wants to silence it. How can we have any challenges to power base or anything else that could be corrupt from any side? Because both parties are corrupt.
I have the Constitution right here, and I can look at the First Amendment and just tell you that it says here, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. Now, it doesn't have in there anything about except if the community standards won't allow for. Once you go down that slope there, then you can begin to claim all kinds of ways of inhibiting free speech. And I'm very much aware, John, of what you said about this law they're trying to bring up in the Senate is being led by Schumer. They want to call him Chuck. I don't call him.
I can't stand that man.
The man.
He's evil.
Yeah, he is evil. But that's what we have in our Congress right now, and that's why this day is important. But we need to use Memorial Day to point out those who are doing a disservice to those who've given their life for freedom in this country. We got people in Washington who are grabbing our freedoms, who are depriving us of our freedom. That dishonors the soldiers that we are memorializing on this wonderful day. People that gave the ultimate sacrifice. Many of them wounded warriors. Those who did not give the ultimate sacrifice, but gave a sacrifice of their bodies in other ways. And we have these persons in the nation's capital who are nothing but criminals that's in power in Washington. And Schumer and 41 other senators have signed this, signed on to, and I know why they're doing it. They're signing on to wanting to put an amendment in the Constitution that will restrict speech, because it's absolute in the First Amendment. They want to restrict it in terms of how speech can be used in terms of criticizing the political leadership. And the reason why they're doing that is very clear, and that is they've let us down. And I'll be dealing with this next week when we deal when we deal with the economy of the country. We continue that discussion. They've let us down to a dead end, and we're almost at the end of that road right now. And they know that what's getting ready to happen in this country, we're going to be talking about who brought this pain upon this nation. And those politicians like Schumer and those others, that's John Conyers, Dingell, and all those persons up there for years and years and years.
ACLU's not going to say much about it at all because they're all Democrats. I guarantee it.
Yeah, they're not going to say a lot about it. But what Schumer's trying to do is head off those that will be talking about it and pointing out the culprits that cause it, because we got to have some people leave power. And once this thing hits, and it's going to hit, we're very close to it. Because they cannot, and when I'm building a whole narrative around this next week to talk about where we are right now and how we got here, and why we cannot avoid the calamity that is upon us right now. And it'll be very clear when we put this together in our next presentation. But I don't want to do anything other than honor our fallen soldiers today, because I have a lot of respect for them. And that's one reason I don't back down, because I keep asking myself, why should I let people push me into a wall or push me into a corner when people have paid the ultimate sacrifice for my right to speak? Wouldn't I be dishonoring the soldiers if I refuse to take the bull by the horn and take the wounds and the arrows and the slings and arrows, they call it, which is just verbal. Nobody's beating me across the head with a crowbar for what I say. They're just simply coming out with other words to criticize the words that I use.
Well, You know, I'll just bring a point of for what we're doing here on this Flint Talk Radio. I was talking to a veteran a few years ago. He was on doing a show, and we talked afterwards. And I said, sometimes I feel kind of chagrined that I didn't go in the military. And he says, well, he said, in many ways, and he was a combat soldier for the first Persian Gulf situation we're in. And he said, well, in many ways, what you're doing is not exact because you're not getting killed, but he possibly could. He said, what you guys are doing in the trenches, doing the media. He said, to me, it's just as gutsy as a lot of the guys that are going out there. And, you know, he said, this is the service, not the support staff. Well, obviously, we're not going to get shot at. I mean, we might, but, you know, that's a possibility in this, especially given this, where we're at city-wise. But, yeah, he said basically the people who are out there in the media who are trying to get the truth out and say, hey, I'm not going to play partisan politics or whatever, they're gutsy. They're actually doing what they can. And he said, I see that just about as every important as what the guys who are fighting in the battles are doing.
It's very important. And John, can you imagine our soldiers having sacrificed their lives for this country and the freedoms this country once stood for? I don't think it stands for that anymore, but it once stood for these freedoms. And we had politicians that were somewhat very mindful of our veterans and respectful of the service they provided for this country, and they didn't do the things they're doing right now. But we have now since the Constitution, according to Thomas Woods, who wrote a book called "Who Killed the Constitution?" They killed it in Washington. The politicians killed it.
Even I don't even remember the extreme right back when I was a kid, back during the Vietnam era, and they were being protested, and they were blaming the war on Richard Nixon. They used to have documentaries, Mr. Nixon's War, a war that he inherited from two Democratic predecessors. Keep that in mind. Largely, I mean, Eisenhower did send advisors, but the first troops on the ground were under Kennedy, escalated underneath LBJ, and that's long. But anyway. And so when I was a kid, though, listen, I never heard the right wanting to restrict and pass legislation about freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. The left, who are supposed to be the paragons of, liberal, are the ones pushing for this. And the American people they should be kicking, screaming, bloody murder. The ACLU should be all over this. Nothing. It is definitely a disservice to what you're talking about, the veterans who have served in the past,
really
present
conflicts. It's disgraceful. That point you made there, John, is a point that's made in the book called Radical Son. That's the point he made. He said that when he's over on the left, he said at least the right was not penalizing you for speech.
No.
He said, but then when the left got in charge, like on the university campuses, for example, if you walk in that classroom, they had an instructor at one of the campuses who told his students that if they disagreed with him on this point and that point, meaning they're coming out of a conservative point of view, to get the so-and-so out of his classroom and do it right now and want to throw him out of the classroom because they didn't drink the Kool-Aid and wasn't going to buy his having all the knowledge, and therefore everybody had to come in and believe what he believes. There's no tolerance on the left. I was making this point. I wanted to come back to something I left. I went to another topic, but I want to make sure I made this point. I was talking about Robin's book. I remember now that I did not finish what I wanted to say about that. Robin has said that in terms of the comments that Sterling made, everybody's worked about it and want to take his freedoms from him because he didn't sound right. And I don't think anybody understands that tape that he made. But Robin in his book said that basketball players, some of the ones who are now over here holier than thou with Donald Sterling, he said that when the basketball players see these blacks coming down the street, they cross over to the other side of the street. That's exactly what Mark Cuban, at least Mark Cuban said there would be a reason for it. Wearing a hoodie. They didn't say they're wearing a hoodie or tattoos. They were just saying blacks walk down the street. And these millionaire basketball players who once lived in those communities where those guys are from, they will cross over to keep from having to pass by those guys. And when Jesse said it and when basketball players do it, no problem. But when Donald Sterling makes comments that they have misunderstood in that tape, all of a sudden, all the basketball players, I had no respect for them, none of them sounded any different. Everybody, Michael Jordan, who never says anything, down with, we can't have him in the end. Why can't you have him? You have 30 owners, and you can't have one person that sounds different from the other 29? What kind of freedom would that be if we require everyone to sound the same way? They have the same ideas. It'll be different. And it wouldn't be different with me because words. Look, you cannot be a racist and be paying somebody. One of his ball players, the one that's in that commercial where I thought we had a twin brother, but they tell me that he's playing both roles as an insurance guy and then the basketball player. He got one player, that's the player that he paid $18 million for. And I don't know if y'all heard J.J. Redick on the team. He's barely making $7 million. Now, that black player who's the guard there is making $18 million. He didn't want to pay the Redick $7 million. And Doc Rivers, the black guy, the black coach, had to go and talk to the white owner to get this guy some money. Because Don Sterling didn't want to pay his white player $7 million because the guy sitting on the bench, he won't pay no $7 million for that. Maybe somebody else can sit on the bench for $2 million. And then the white player said that he didn't want to pay me because I was white. The man's a businessman. Can we get that down to a science? The man's a businessman, and he makes business decisions. They got him down to being a racist because he didn't want to rent to blacks and Hispanics. Well, you know, folks, blacks and Hispanics don't have the same relationship to property that whites do. Now, if you think they do, go to Grand Blanc and then come on the North End over here in Flint. And let's get real here. That's not about racism. It's about the man wants his property not torn up. Not that all blacks tear property up. That's not what I'm saying. And if you say that's what I'm saying, that's you saying that. I'm saying that you look in black communities and you don't see the same type of protection and respect for property that you see in other communities, in white communities, for example. You go to Grand Blanc, go to Flushing, you see different in how property is being used there. Now, those of you who say otherwise, you lying through your teeth. And I ain't going to apologize for saying that you lying. The man is a businessman. He doesn't want people moving in there that he might have that has a question about whether they're going to tear his property up. Doesn't mean all blacks. It means some blacks, a lot of blacks. And y'all seem like you can't understand that because you choose not to understand it. Like you chose not to understand that tape. I think if you're going to have this day, Memorial Day, making sense here, if you're going to really honor our soldiers, if you're really going to do more than just talk about it as one day of the year and the first day really of the vacation period, if it means more than that, if it really means that you honor these soldiers, you will stand up and demand your right to speak. And I have to tell you something, and I wrote about this on my wall. Nobody's ever written about it in the history of the country, and that is this. There are no restrictions on speech allowed in this country if it's a free country. Now, you can make all these little comments about, well, in 1919, in the Schenck versus United States case, Oliver Wendell Holmes said that you can't holler fire in a crowded, he said you can't falsely holler fire in a crowded theater. You know something? That case wasn't even about somebody hollering fire in a theater. Oliver Wendell Holmes made that up to hide his tyranny. You would think that somebody hollering fire in a theater, and he made that up. Said you can't do that. Nobody did it. When he was talking, the comment was, can you during World War I pass out leaflets and flyers and speak out against the war in this country? And you can. Now, let's talk about the theater he talked about. Hollering fire in a theater is not about speech. It's about property rights. You can't holler, since this is Memorial Day, you can't get up there in front of that screen. Now, if I paid $5.50 to get up in that mug, as they say, and I'm eating that popcorn that wasn't made by Redenbacher because they're too cheap to buy the best popcorn, and that's another $12. And you get up there and read the Gettysburg Address on that stage. Now, when I pay $5.50 to go in there and see Superman, you up there reading the Gettysburg Address, you can read that on your time, and I read it for myself. When I go to the movie house, I went into somebody else's property, and in there I bought into that property to be used for this reason. Now, you can't tell me that that's about speech. That ain't about speech. That's about property rights. And Oliver Wendell Holmes was making a mockery of the law by saying that you can restrict speech in this country. You can't restrict speech in this country. But it doesn't mean that you can talk in every situation because there are property rights also, the organizational rights that you have. But I tell you this, there is no right for anybody to take property for something somebody said in the privacy of their own home, talking to their girlfriend. Where is that going to be written in a free country? and people have died, and they got these fascists in this country, like Adam Silver. This man is a fascist. This man is Mussolini. This man dishonors Memorial Day. And you have not caught on to that yet. And Anderson Cooper dishonors these soldiers, bringing this man on and then giving him the Inquisition rather than telling this man, rather than saying on his program, this man has a right to his speech. What are people in those graves, what do they die for if we can't talk in this country? Well, you give me I get upset when I find out that we're talking out both sides of our mouth. I honor our soldiers. I know what they were fighting for. I stand up in their name, and I speak in their name when I speak the way I speak, and I do so unapologetically. And those of you that are waiting for an apology from George Moss in the soldiers' names, it just ain't going to happen, because we have the right to speech in this country, and there are absolutely no limits on speech in this country. You can talk about hate speech and all that's just politicians getting into the fray, or talking about bullying somebody. All that's politicians getting involved in it. You have the right to speak in this country, and there are no limits in your speech. And there are no speech zones and stuff like that, because they didn't die for one part of the country, they died for the country itself. This is Memorial Day. I want you to take advantage of it. Go out in your backyards with your family, barbecue and all those things, get together. Come out tomorrow ready to, in fact, take our country back from those who are subverting our freedoms. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.